status to do this. You know, it's just not an ordinary thing. He's lived next to Rand for a long time, like 18 years, and I don't think he's talked to him, though, in about the last 10. So it's strange, and this is not a normal thing, you know, for your neighbor to come over to your yard and cause violence. It's pretty weird.
He announced his return to the Senate on Twitter, saying he's ready to help move forward with tax cuts. What's your assessment? First, did you think he came back too soon? You're a doctor.
Well, you know, parents tend to be more protective, you know, than others. I know that was my first thought, but I'm not, you know, next to him. I don't see what he's doing, but I know he was really in trouble because in phone conversation, I was the one that encouraged him to go back and get another x-ray, and that's when they found the fluid on the lungs. So, yeah, we worry about it, and I think another week's rest couldn't have hurt him, but I've always been one that didn't baby our kids. You know, I was usually always encourage them, don't let her run too long. But this is a more serious thing. But I think it's better we keep moving even when we're not feeling good. Matter of fact, Rand told me that it was hard to get up because if anybody's had this to them, a fractured rib, it's hard to roll around or cough or sneeze. Yeah. And but he said when he could get up, one of the best things he could do was walk. So this is what I've always told the kids, get up and walk and move around and you'll feel better. And most of the time, that's pretty good advice.
Okay, where's the House going to go with its tax plan this week? And if you were in that august assembly, how would you vote?
Well, you know, it's hard to say until you see the final version. The way I looked at these, and this is the way I would if I were in Congress, if there's a net reduction in taxes, I'd have a hard time not voting for it. But if there's a net increase, I don't think I could vote for it. And they're going to claim things. But my big problem with it is that they don't know what they're talking about. You know, they're talking about years out, and they don't even know what this year's budget will be like. You know, the revenues may go down. There may be another flood in Texas, and there may be another war in Europe, and there'll be supplementals already. This new president's had several supplementals, and people are all for them because they were, you know, natural disasters. So that's why I don't think much will be accomplished. Well, if I were convinced there was a little less spending and a little less taxes, net-wise, I would vote for it. But I'm not too certain of exactly what's in that bill.
Are you saying, Ron, that based on things that happen that you don't expect, you can't have a tax plan? Are you saying that? I mean, because anything can happen.
Yeah. Yeah, but the big thing is, from a libertarian viewpoint, is we shouldn't be involved in solving every single problem that happens to anybody. You know, if you have a business and you go bankrupt, why is it that the people assume, well, that was uncalled for. We have to bail them out, though. But if you're big enough, we bail them out. And just think of what we did in 08 and 09, trillions of dollars. No, it was unexpected. The Congress were pikers. They only appropriated, a trillion or so, where the Fed created like 14 or 15 billion dollars. So a libertarian just can't do the nickel and diming. It's just that why are we involved in this? Why? Because it's a moral hazard to say there's insurance and promises if you get into trouble, we're going to take care of you. Well, government doesn't take care of anybody. All they do is they go up and round up some wealth and money and taxes and take it from somebody else. But that leads to bankruptcy, and that's where we are today. We have followed that philosophy for too long.
What do you think of the Senate plan? It's significantly different from the House's. With their bill will include Obamacare going out, and what's your reaction to that part of the House of,
well, they were
Congress?
the first. Yeah, the Senate was the first one to mention that. Well, they've talked about it before, and the House is now talking about it. Oh, no, I think that would be good because it just doesn't add up. The people who pay, these funds into Medicare to make it work are the people who couldn't afford insurance, so they're paying this penalty, which is a tax. So if you remove that option, you're actually cutting taxes on poor people. But this whole system of Obamacare pushed the prices up, pushed people out, then they'd pay the penalty, and that was another tax. And then if we go to cut it out, you know, they say, well, you're going to make it worse. We need their money. Why do we need the money coming from poor people who had no money to buy insurance at the same time? Just look at the increases in the cost of insurance. It really isn't working. We have to admit this.
But
Government's
Ron,
they're not good. They're not good managers. I'll tell you that.
Ron, we do have millions more insured that weren't insured before. And how can that be bad?
Well, it's not bad, but some people question that. And the other thing is why are so many poor people not buying into it? Because they can't afford it. And it's just that government management has never proven to be, you know, all that good. I think that there's other ways to do it. I keep thinking about delivering health care compared to delivering a cell phone. Just think of, what if the government said that, well, we're going to have cell phones for everybody because it's very important for health and protection and jobs, and everybody has to have a cell phone, and they decided 20 years ago. So they give the contract to one cell phone company. The cost would have gone up, they wouldn't have worked, and it would be a disaster. Instead, when it was put into the marketplace, the quality went up, way up. The phones got smarter and smarter, and the prices came down. And but people don't have faith and confidence that a service can be distributed like you can distribute other goods and services in a free market. Larry, I've said it many times, but I practiced medicine when there was no Medicare or Medicaid, and I've worked in Catholic hospitals. People were never turned away. I was raised in, you know, at a time where insurance wasn't even, you know, much of a deal. There was no third-party payments, but prices were down. Used to be doctors and hospitals always gave you the lowest price. But when the third party pays, whether it's insurance or government or anybody else, the highest price is paid. Then who sets the rules? The insurance companies, the drug companies, they make these profits, and the patient suffers.
Are you saying Medicare's been a bad thing?
Well, I think I'm saying that before Medicare, nobody was out in the streets without medication, and technically there's no authority for the government to be distributing medical care. Where did this come from? It's not in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, where it tells you exactly what we're allowed to do. And you say, well, maybe we should make an exception. Okay, if you want to make an exception, say government should distribute health care, you ought to change the Constitution, because now there is no responsibility at all to the Constitution. That's why we go to wars without declarations. You know, I think that would be a good idea to say, well, yeah, if you think we have to go to war to protect our interests, which is nothing more than corporate interests in the military-industrial complex, then you ought to declare the war. No, you don't do that. The other day, the House tried to get a bill passed that said that why don't we have a debate on whether should we have have the authority to go to war in Yemen. And they wouldn't even have it. They doctored the bill up and watered it down and made things worse. But we shouldn't be fighting and being close allies with Saudi Arabia. And the tragedy, all you have to think about is the tragedy that's going on in Yemen, mainly because we don't obey the Constitution. So I emphasize the Constitution. But if you want to come up and say, okay, Ron, you're old-fashioned, we don't like what we do, we should amend the Constitution, and government should be responsible for medical care and all education, which they are, essentially, and it's a disaster. I mean, it's expensive. And look at the educational system. Kids now, well, they have to have free education. And now there's this $1.4 trillion of debt that's never going to be paid, and the quality of education goes down. I don't know how you can make a case for saying that we need more government management in these affairs, because it has created the bankruptcy, which is going to destroy, you know, the middle class. Matter of fact, the middle class is suffering tremendously now, and that tax bill is not going to help the middle class, because the system is rigged. It's rigged against the middle class and the poor. It's rigged for the super wealthy, and we should not be careless in order to grant more power to the government to protect these powerful special interests.
Let's touch some other areas. The president's just back from a 5-nation visit to Asia. How did he do?
Well, you know, I did one of my reports on that the other day, and actually, I said he didn't do too badly. You know, he was not his usual campaign-style rhetoric. On occasion, you heard that, and I thought it was half decent. But you know, I thought it was. you know, chipped away at. There was a lot. There was nothing. The opposition couldn't say anything decent about it, and they would find little bits of things and said he didn't say this. He didn't lecture the Chinese on human rights. Well, why don't we lecture our people and our Congress and our government on human rights before we go over? But the media was critical of Trump because he didn't go and try to pick a fight with the Chinese, telling them how to run their country. I don't happen to believe that's a wise thing to do anyway.
Why does he seem attracted, though, like in the Philippines and Russia, attracted to strong men government, strong man in charge?
I don't know. It must be his personality or something. So since I don't understand him, not many people do, and I wasn't a supporter for him, didn't vote for him, but I always hope for the best and always look for the positive, because I think that he honestly believed, and he even restated it on this trip, that we should have better relations with Russia. Why do we have to do this? Even though now, since he's been there, policies have shifted away from that position of talking and at least being diplomatic with the Russians. He was, you know, has drifted over to the neocon position, supporting and badgering, put on sanctions, and all these things are just trying to precipitate, you know, a Cold War, which they are doing. So I think him backing off from that was bad, and I don't know where he stands, because the other day, you know, like I said, he was really saying that what's wrong with getting along with Russia? And yeah. I don't know anything wrong with it. I think that's a good idea.
We'll have more with former Congressman Ron Paul, who speaks his mind right after this. Welcome back to Politicking. My guest is Ron Paul, the former Republican U.S. Congressman from Texas. He's founder of the Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity, and he's joining us from Lake Jackson, Texas. Where do you think the Mueller investigation's heading, Ron?
The same way it's been heading, downhill. I can't imagine what's going on there, because I think they are making a mountain out of a molehill, to tell you the truth. But I think it's so partisan, and yet I say there's too much bipartisanship in Washington when it comes to issues, spending and wars and these kind of things. But when it comes to power, there's really a bipartisan fight. And this is a fight over power, and I think Trump sets himself up for trouble like this. I don't think Russia had very much to do with deciding who got elected last go-around. And I don't think it's quite fair and balanced. I think Trump has a point when he talks about why don't we investigate some of those funds that went into the Clinton Foundation? So it's more about politics, but I think that I don't think that, well, I think they may end up putting people in jail, but I don't think that, the amazing thing to me is, if Trump is this strong, tough leader, why would his administration make sure they picked this guy is about as anti-Trump as you can get, and hire everybody who's been in opposition to Trump, and then Trump complains about it? But so I get confused on that, to tell you the truth.
What do you make up of the Republican Party today? Has it changed significantly since you left?
Philosophically, not. I think it's changed because the Democrats have changed and the country has changed. And I think the problem is that we are now bankrupt. The debt is unmanageable. If interest rates go up, it'll be a total calamity. So they keep the interest rates very, very low, and this will keep the economy in the doldrums. In spite of Wall Street doing well, there is still the division of the distribution of wealth, which I think is the major source of the social friction which is going on. So the Republican Party has changed like the Democratic Party because they're looking for power, but they have absolutely no answers because they are still supporting the prevailing attitude that the people generally have supported. Government's to take care of me from cradle to grave, take care of all my medical needs, take care of all my educational needs, take care of all the bailouts, and the rich get to write the rules and they get the bailouts first. But this is coming to an end, and I don't think they want to admit the truth that the country's bankrupt and that we're supposed to cut something. That is not ever considered in Washington, and the Republicans who pay lip service to that, they don't do any better than the Democrats, and the Democrats don't do any better than the Republicans on the issue of war and civil liberties. So it's a mess, and it's coming to an end because this is a non-viable system. Economically, it'll collapse. The foreign policy is not doing well, and the people aren't going to tolerate this division and disparity in income distribution because that is a result of the monetary system that we have and a system that takes care of the rich over the poor.
President Trump takes great credit for the stock market. Why don't you salute him on that?
Well, Larry, that's sort of like when Obama came in. He came in 2009, and, things were really, really bad, and they stayed bad and are still bad. And the Republicans jumped on him. Oh, look at what the economy is like under Obama. Obama had nothing to do with the collapse in 08, 09, and all of 10. That was a result of monetary policy and spending and the Federal Reserve under the Republicans, under Bush. So, no, I think Trump's making a serious mistake by taking any credit because next month or so, you're going to see a calamity drop in the stock market. Then what's he going to say? Oh, yeah, I'm responsible for that. You can't take credit for something you don't deserve and then try to escape the blame if you're going to say, well, I'm responsible for the good times.
What do you make of the Roy Moore story in Alabama?
I wished it would go away. That's what I wished. And I think there's too many demagogues on both sides. And of course, I don't think anybody knows the real results on this. But I think the Republicans are hysterical, to deal with this subject. But
well, don't you think it's a serious subject? Sexual harassment is a serious subject in America, in Congress.
But I don't think they're dealing with that. I think they're dealing with who gets seated and how they're going to vote. I mean,
based on sexual harassment.
We're not talking about. Yeah, well, but we're going to solve all that problem in the Congress, Larry. They're all going to take training about what sexual harassment is. If we're at this point where the politicians teach the politicians what sexual harassment is, we're in big trouble. And I think we're going to teach people about sound economic policy. But that's what's coming. Sure, it's serious. The Libertarians condemns any act of violence. There could be nothing worse than the rape and the abuse of another person. So it's horrible. But that represents an attitude that is not going to be solved by the politicians. But yes, the people in Alabama have every right to ask these questions and make their own decisions.
Right.
But I think the demagoguery is out of control, and that's why I said I wished it just would go away.
Syria has formally joined the Paris deal aimed at slowing climate change. The United States is the only country in the world in opposition to that pact. Where do libertarians stand on climate change?
Well, if anybody with property does anything to disturb the climate or the environment, they're 100% reliable. One of the reasons why we ended up with a collusion of big business and government was in the Industrial Revolution is that they made it so that you couldn't file suits, and there was a lot of pollution. I lived in Pittsburgh, and the rivers became, a sewer, and it wasn't cleaned up till a long time later, but not with the federal government, by just the city of Pittsburgh, and saying, this isn't right. You can't destroy another person's property. So the environment is ruined. I think there's a lot of questions to ask about whether it really changes the climate, because quite frankly, you know, it is very evident they don't talk about global warming anymore. They talk about climate change as if you know, the storm we had here last week had something to do with people in California doing something with the weather, and that's why we had a bad flood. So I think that's way overblown.
What worries Ron Paul the most? What do you must lose sleep over a lot of things. What tops the list?
I don't lose sleep, and you know, they used to kid me a bit in Congress when I'd vote by myself, and I would always kid them. I said, but I sleep well at night because I just, you know, look at it and do what I think is right. You know, it's amazing. I think of all the problems, whether it's the foreign policy or the economic problems of the Federal Reserve and the overtaxation, overregulation, and all this stuff. But really, the government is a reflection of the people. And I think that we've lost our way in many ways, individually in a moral sense. And, you know, I believe it was Adams who said that, yes, we have given you, you know, a system that won't work if you don't have a moral people. Freedom doesn't work if there's no self-responsibility. So maybe our system that was devised that worked pretty well and is not working now is because we don't have the moral responsibility. You would say, I know you talked a little bit about medical care, and maybe there was a time 50 years ago when I started where people were more generous, the doctors were more generous, and people weren't left out. But if that happens where that people become less morally responsible for themselves or for the family, or the family breaks down, maybe the government that the libertarians are promoting makes it more difficult. Maybe we're not capable of doing that unless we change the people's sense of responsibility for themselves. I think that becomes the solution. Matter of fact, if you're not responsible for yourself and you don't take care of yourself and your family, you lose a sense of satisfaction. And I think that's where satisfaction comes from.
But how do you get that? You can't make a law.
No, that's right. That's why I say it's sort of ironic. Here I talk about all these problems, and I come up with something that we need to change the hearts and minds of people. I know that is true educationally. You have to change people's understanding, because we've lived now, you know, for nearly 100 years with a Keynesian type of economic interventionism where they teach that deficits are good and that you should have a Federal Reserve that prints money when you need it. Well, I think that that is an idea that hasn't worked, but I think the moral standards have eroded. Let's say if you wanted to, just for instance, what if it is the breakdown of the family? You know, that is the basic problem. And that you had a better family unit where they did assume responsibility for themselves, it would solve a lot of the problem. You're right. You don't pass a law for that. So maybe what we have in Washington is a reflection of us out here. If we know and believe and understand the proper role of government, and there's a prevailing attitude, believe me, the members of Congress are going to vote the right way. When I did a lot of work on auditing the Fed, I got the people in the country to say, hey, that sounds like a pretty good idea. And I had a unanimous Republican vote and passed wholeheartedly in the House of Representatives. But we changed the attitudes about the people. So I think there are you know, economic attitudes and foreign policy attitudes, but there's also a moral attitude, which I think might be on top of the list on this deferring to government and the acceptance of the use of force. See, the opposite of a libertarian is saying that it is proper for government to use force. Most Americans, I think, conservatives and liberals and all, they agree we're not supposed to go and steal from our neighbors. We're not supposed to go to our neighbors and beat up each other either. Everybody knows that's wrong to do it. But nobody hardly, other than libertarians, challenges the thing that says, should the government be able to go and steal? So if you have no cars, Larry, and I have 3, and you send your congressman over and say, hey, I need one of Ron Paul's car, and they do it, and if I don't give you the car, I go to jail, that's the use of government force. It's that principle that has to be challenged.
Ron, you are
How many cars do you have, Larry?
Yeah, I have more than one. I want to thank you, Ron, for you're always very interesting and always great talking.